Back at the Woody Hayes Athletics Center on Tuesday to talk to Ryan Day, coming out of the win against Maryland, going into a game against Purdue, and it's the second year in a row where we are waiting to see what's going on with the Ohio State receiver. Last week, Marvin Harris Jr. came out of the Notre Dame game, had a week off. There were questions, hey, how's he doing? And Ryan Day right away was like, no, he's fine. He's playing Saturday. Not the same answer today with Emeka Egbuka, Stephen. Do you think Emeka Egbuka should play on Saturday, considering how much Ryan Day seemed to kind of talk about him from a questionable nature today?
No. Emeka Egbuka left the game in a boot on Saturday, and when I was watching him on the sideline, they weren't even dealing with his foot. They were dealing with his knee. So I'm not a doctor. I don't know what the actual injury is. I'm saying that right now. But you left the game in a boot. Marvin Harris Jr. did not leave the game in a boot when he got his ankle injury against Notre Dame. He had ice on it, but he didn't leave the game in a boot. No, I don't think Emeka Egbuka should play. You shouldn't need Emeka Egbuka to beat Purdue. That wide receiver room is loaded. Xavier Johnson is a quality option in the slot behind Emeka Egbuka. This might be an opportunity to get Carnell Tate on the field. Maybe Brandon Ennis at some point. That's just throwing that out there. But you can go deeper in this wide receiver room against Purdue and just let him sit and then bring him back against Penn State when you'll actually need him again.
Important point of note is that Marvin Harris Jr. had the extra week off. I wonder, the way Marvin Harris Jr. talked about his injury, whether he would have been able to play against Maryland if that had been the very next week. He sort of seemed to not talk very favorably about that. Obviously, he looked fine on Saturday. So Emeka Egbuka doesn't have that week off. And after playing Purdue, Ohio State has Penn State at home, and they go at Wisconsin. So does that affect, do you think, this decision at all from Ohio State's standpoint?
It does. I think I'm looking at this. Look, it's October. We can talk about playoff baseball. I think I look at this as you had a really great starting pitcher pitching Game 6, and you know what? If you don't want to use him in Game 7, that's fine, but you send him to the bullpen anyway just in case you need him. So, if there's a situation where if you have to play him, then you can play him. If you have to, now obviously this is kind of going under the assumption that he can't hurt it any worse. There's not a significant re-injury risk. That is, I think, kind of stated that, or should be unstated. I think that can kind of be understood without really saying, well, if he can hurt it, blah, blah, blah. No, that's not what we're talking about. I think if you're at a point with Emeka where it's just a pain issue, don't worry about him playing until you have to worry about him playing. If it's 20-20 at the midway through the third quarter and your offense is really struggling and the defense has another defensive touchdown or something like that and you're just kind of scraping along, then I can see a situation where you would play him. Again, you send the number one ace out to the bullpen in Game 7 and you say, look, we know you're tired, we know you're not ready to play, but if we need you for a little bit, if we need you for an inning, we might have to call you. And I think that that's the way that I would approach Emeka here. So unless there's just something disastrous that happens in the Purdue game where you're not comfortably ahead, I wouldn't play him.
I think 2020 in the middle of the third quarter would be like borderline disastrous. This is not a team that really should hang with Ohio State. And I think if they're in that position, they're in trouble in a lot of other ways. And I don't think Emeka Egbuka playing at like 60%, and I'm just throwing a number out there because I have not examined him, nor am I a doctor, even if I had. But if you're putting him out there in such a reduced capacity, I don't think that's what's going to save you there. I would expect something more like what happened with Trevion Henderson last week, frankly. The way that this is trending right now, I'd be a little bit surprised if he's even dressed to play or even really warm up on Saturday. Just the way that Ryan Day talked about it today, maybe that will happen, and maybe it'll be a thing that goes more up to the deadline like they've had with Josh Proctor. Had a game early this year where he was in full uniform but didn't play. But the important thing is Ryan Day did say, sounded very questionable whether he could play this week, but did say it's not long-term. And I think the most important things that Ohio State needs Emeka Egbuka for are Penn State, Wisconsin, and Michigan. They shouldn't need him at all to beat Purdue, and I think if there's any question at all, there's no reason he should play on Saturday. We'll talk about that more on Buckeye Talk. Get it wherever you can find podcasts and get the text 614-350-3315.